Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be speaking to Amanda Bishop. She is the moderator of a Facebook support group for those that are following the low FODMAP diet. She's also a fellow IBS sufferer, and we're going to unpack the benefit of joining some of these groups and some of the conversations that are happening on these groups that might be useful to those of you that are on the low FODMAP diet, and some great top tips. So really looking forward to this chat. I'm just going to let Amanda in right now. We're going to kick it off and cover a few things. So hopefully, excellent. That worked smoothly. Third time lucky is always a charm.
Good old technology. It works when it works, and when it doesn't, it doesn't.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out of what is, I'm sure, a very busy day of yours. But I've given a very brief intro to who you are. Can you share with everyone sort of your background and your personal story, really, as to sort of how you got into, how you got on a low FODMAP journey in the first place?
I think difficult is probably the first word to start with, but so in 2012, I actually got food poisoning on a holiday. I always knew as a kid that I'd probably had some sort of dairy allergy. I used to come out with eczema. I used to got a lot of stomach pains. I remember being a young person and kind of sitting around the breakfast table, really not wanting to eat breakfast because it caused me stomach pain, but not really knowing what was going on. So in 2012, it kind of triggered. I came back from a lovely holiday where I'd obviously eaten a lot of bread, eggs, full English breakfast, a lot of curry with onions in, a lot of cream-based products and things like that. And I was just in bits. I was in so much pain. Went to the doctors. They did all the tests, had some MRIs, had some scans. Nothing really came about. They just said, right, you've got IBS. And I said, oh, okay, well, what does that mean? What do I do with that? And they were very good actually at the time. They referred me on to a dietitian, and the dietitian went through various different things. And she mentioned this thing called FODMAP. And I was like, FODMAP? What's a FODMAP? And then gave me these lovely blue booklets, or blue, green and red booklets, I think they were, that some kind of viewers may know about these booklets. They still exist now, and said, let's follow this plan and let's figure out whether this can alleviate some of your symptoms for you. I was really happy that actually really did. It taught me a lot of lessons about my diet, about what I eat. It taught me the differences between lactose intolerance and dairy intolerance and gluten and celiac. But also it kind of helped kind of look at things. However, fast forward to 2019, I just decided I didn't need this anymore. I didn't need to be a FODMAP person anymore. And I just relapsed. And I ate what I wanted. I stuffed my face full of glutinous things, had a really bad time of it, and then found myself needing some help. So I kind of did the usual thing of Googling, especially on Facebook, and discovered the Low FODMAP UK group. Felt that I wasn't alone, which was nice, in some of the things that had happened and some of the symptoms that I had, and really started to think again about how I could get my kind of life food-wise back on track.
And I think your journey, a lot of people can resonate with. I think it's often a long journey, not a straight journey, definitely a couple of dead ends along the way. But I think the most important thing that you've ended with is this fact of actually just getting support, and maybe that you don't have to do this journey alone, which I suppose is what brought you to becoming one of the moderators. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of this Facebook group that you moderate? What's the sort of thinking behind it, and what level of support did you get on your own personal journey?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of Facebook groups out there, I think, and I think you should approach everyone with caution, is what I say. And also, everyone has their own opinions on these things, particularly in any group, and we have the same in ours. We're very privileged. We have over 10,000 members, and we do try to be very strict in terms of what we do discuss. So as I said, I came about the group in about 2019. There's a lovely admin lady called Charlotte. She oversees the group. She also created a fantastic web resource called fodmappers.co.uk, which is kind of her FODMAP journey along the way. So we act as a support network, really, for those ad hoc questions that maybe people don't know or don't have the free and safe space to be able to ask. So things around you know, a lot of them are, is this safe? Can we eat this one? With labels and double checking and things like that. We also stick very closely to the Monash guidelines. So we do make first recommendations for anybody new who joins us that says you really should download the Monash app. We see a lot of people coming to us either from a GP referral with these lovely booklets or a little piece of paper that says, now go away and do it. We see some people connected already to dietitians, which we would always recommend, obviously being in touch with a health professional where you can, and a qualified health professional as well. But the beauty about Monash, I guess, is that they are the creators of this diet. And I hate the word diet. I wish it wasn't. You know, it does go through the different stages. It go through they constantly retest the foods so things can change. And we try to signpost where we get to this resource because it's really good. But also we are sounding really, particularly for people who have a bad day or who relapse like me and just want someone to go, it's going to be okay, it's fine. What we don't do is medical advice. So we are pretty strict. I'd say we do shut down conversations that relate to specific medication, to medical procedures. We try to really keep it about the low FODMAP diet, and we actually don't talk a lot about generalized IBS either. We are quite niche, and we try to keep it that, and I think that's probably why it's grown really and that's so successful. But we are always happy to chat, happy to have an honest conversation. Particularly we talk a lot about poo, which obviously not many people want to talk about. Happens, and again, you do have the anonymous function if you really don't want to label yourself. But yeah, I think we try to act as that support for people who come across which can be a very confusing. Sorry.
Yeah, you know, it is, you know, I think the low FODMAP diet is confusing for everyone. There's a lot of things you have to think about removing it in various different stages. So I think it's great to be in a space where you can ask questions from other people that are really living the low FODMAP diet, rather than, in some cases, the healthcare professionals that have directed you to the diet but don't have any personal day-to-day experience. I mean, obviously, as a dietitian, I start with the proviso that please don't do this diet unless you have been asked to do this diet by or suggested by your GP or dietitian, because the diet isn't for everybody and you may not have to follow a complicated elimination diet. And ideally, you should really be seeing a dietitian and doing this with a dietitian. The guidance does say so. All NICE guidance says do it with a FODMAP trained dietitian. However, we know, Amanda, it's not always that easy to find a low FODMAP diet trained dietitian. Unfortunately, I wish it was the case. And when you're not feeling well, having to wait 3 to 6 months on the NHS isn't great. So still keep on the waiting list, and you know, and then find the trusted information and the reliable information, which you've mentioned, the Monash Low FODMAP app.
Yeah, we do find as well that even people who come to us with the first referral will still go on the waiting list for sadly, we've had cases where people have been referred to a dietitian and had to wait to see another dietitian who are obviously FODMAP trained. They go in between. I'd say one of my tips as well is that often people will come to us, particularly if they haven't got a dietitian, and try it half-heartedly, which I know it is quite complicated sometimes and quite difficult, but this actually in the long run makes it even more complicated. And we often see repeat customers, as it were. So people will come back to us and say, oh, I'm doing it really strictly this time and I'm doing it better. Whereas actually that's kind of what you need to do in the beginning. So we always say, don't rush. You've come this far and you've suffered horribly probably for this long, 1 or 2 extra days in terms of that planning, that preparation, getting familiar with what this means for you, switching up. One of the easiest ways is to switch up what you already eat. So for example, if you love a lasagna, if you love a shepherd's pie, how can you switch these foods up to actually make them low FODMAP rather than having to cut absolutely everything out? And I think that's the slight difference between the booklets that are given and the Monash app, is that there's a lot that actually it isn't a big red no for. So apple, for example, is a big one. You are actually allowed 23 grams of apple, which if it's one of the last ingredients in a gluten-free bread, and it says there, it does mean that you can eat that bread. Whereas often, sometimes you get a very black and white, no, you can't because it says apple, whereas you can. And that can lead to over restrictions as well. So I think it's being planning, it's being prepared, planning ahead where you can and sticking to what you love. This doesn't mean that you suddenly have to eat like a rabbit and just eat vegetables, which I think is also perhaps a misconception. You know, you can still have the odd chips, crisps, chocolate if you want it, but obviously it's about a healthy balance. So making sure that you do cover all the nutrients that you need, making sure that you reflect on what you eat, and that you are trying to avoid those high FODMAP foods as well.
Yeah, agreed. And for those that are wondering about the booklets, I trained at King's College London, and these booklets are produced for dietitians to use and hand out. And I think the one benefit with the booklets is they're a piece of paper that you can carry around the supermarket, and it can often give you a good starting list of where to go. But I do agree with you, and unfortunately that, you know, paper resources are out of date as soon as they are printed, and it's really nice to be able to use the low FODMAP Monash app. I can never say it correctly, because you know, it's constantly updated. They're always researching things. For example, there's just been a change to red peppers, and they've revised that down, and tomatoes, and so, you know, and there are some things, and what ultimately we all want is as diverse or varied a diet as possible, and not to be on a crazy restricted diet, because that in the long term isn't great for your nutritional, you know, for nutritional outcomes and so forth. So agree absolutely on that. Amanda, in terms of Facebook group and you know, getting support on that, I think some people get a bit nervous. There's often a lot of conversations, and you know, it may not always be relevant to them. How do they know that they're actually getting reliable advice? Because I've certainly seen some rather crazy suggestions made, not in your group, because it's very well moderated, but I have seen it elsewhere, and that often does make me quite worried that people get onto the wrong low FODMAP journey. And as you said, we don't want to make this journey more complicated than it already has to be.
No, so one of the things that we have is a list of questions when you first join. It's not a public group. You do have to kind of answer some questions. We ask everyone to declare if they're a health professional, so whether that be a dietitian or a nurse, and we actually have a log of who these people are, so we can track conversations. So people do advice. We ask them to not give advice, actually, even if they are health professionals or a qualified dietitian or nutritionist, because it puts a lot of pressure on that individual as well. And obviously they will always have their own opinion. They may be coming at this from their own point of view, but actually want to do the journey. They may not be qualified in the FODMAP ways, as it were. So we try to take that pressure off those people that have identified as health professionals themselves. Once the questions have been answered, we don't let people in who haven't answered the questions. So if any of you are thinking of joining, make sure you answer the questions before you come to us. And then once people do post their questions, there are 6 moderators, so we do all try to review each question as it comes up. We also use a lot of hashtags in our group. So for example, new starters, elimination, meals, recipes. The one that comes up a lot is gravy and stock cubes, because you know, everybody wants to know which ones the safe ones are with no onion or garlic in. So we create these hashtags to go with some of our posts, so that when people come and join us, we encourage them to use the search function in the first place to see what is said about these things. And then we can then clarify if people then want further kind of support. We also encourage people not just to continuously post, is this safe, is this not safe? Because with the FODMAP diet, it's probably, if you are going to be affected and changed by it and you do fail a FODMAP group, it's sadly likely, I shouldn't say sadly actually, because it can be really life-changing, but it's likely then that that is a lifelong change for you. So actually learning to label read, learning to understand what is in food, learning how to cook maybe differently or putting food together, it's a journey. And I think it's part of the process of understanding how your body works and how to deal with your IBS. And therefore, even if you fail a group or you need to make changes, it's likely to be that that's going to continue on for a while. Now, people do reintroduce, and they try back reintroducing FODMAP groups later down the line with some success. Fantastic, because obviously bodies change, microbiomes change and things like that. But it's always worth trying to really understand and get to grips with what things are. So a lot of hidden things in stock cubes, for example, say the word flavorings, particularly for savory food. it's a lovely manufacturing way of hiding what the true ingredients are sometimes in labels. So it might be in flavorings there is hidden onion and garlic powder or essence or something like that. So it's always worth checking with manufacturers. But if you really are stuck and you've had a go at Monash, you've had a go at looking at it yourself, and you really want to know, I really don't know where to turn to, absolutely post the ingredients, post the packet and say, is this safe? And one of us will definitely get back to you and say yes or no, or have you tried this? And we always try and reason no because of this. So we try and point out what it is that may be safe within the item that has been posted. Though we get that a lot, we also do get the whole, this is a really scary thing. Is anyone feeling overwhelmed? Yes. And we're very honest in, we don't try to hide from the fact this is an easy thing. For some people, it's really, a lot of people will cook themselves. It is just that conversion of what they would normally cook. For other people, it may be, this is a new journey for them. They've never really cooked their own food before. They may be cooking for others as well. So it might be, we do have a number of parents that come and say that children have been referred. And we always err on the side of caution, and we always recommend that if there are young people, they must be seen by a health professional, because the Monash app is definitely more designed for adults. So again, portion sizes and things like that, you would need to get some professional help with that, I would suggest. But again, it's about understanding what works for each individual, but within the remit of what their lifestyle is as well. You know, this should never be an expensive diet where you're suddenly having to switch everything to gluten-free, or having to find specialist vegan products, or having to suddenly spend £100 more a week on your shopping when the cost of living just doesn't allow that to happen. So it is about finding alternatives that are safe, that are doable in bulk potentially as well. I love my slow cooker, I'm not going to lie. And thinking as well about what works for you as a family. Do you want to have one individual meal for you, or can it be that everyone in the family eats in the same way as you?
Yeah, I think fantastic, practical, real life tips of how to make this diet more accessible and doable. So hats off to you guys. That's fantastic. And I think just on the kids front, it's way more complicated because kids are also growing, and you sort of have to weigh up, and elimination diets can be quite tricky. You know, don't want to sort of instigate fear of food or eating disorders. So any parents, definitely go and do this under the care of a healthcare professional, because really it's not one that I think you want to try do alone for all those reasons. Now let's delve into some of the misconceptions that you probably see on a daily basis that might come up. What are some of the misconceptions that are coming up in the group that people are talking about?
Oh, where to start? I think the biggest one is that people think that FODMAP means gluten-free straight away, and it doesn't. Yes, you do need to avoid wheat flour and large amounts of kind of glutinous products, as it were, but there are safe serving sizes of normal pasta, normal bread, and although they are smaller, which is often why people go down the gluten-free route, there are reasons for not taking out gluten completely out of your diet. So we always recommend, unless you have had your test for celiac disease, please carry on eating the gluten while you wait for these tests to happen. Because unfortunately for me, back in the day, I took out gluten very quickly. I realised that it was a problem for me and never went back on it. So I never actually got officially tested for celiac disease. And I really don't want to eat gluten for a number of weeks. I just cope. So I've made the decision to just stick with what I am and know what works for me. But I do wish that I had been tested earlier on and kind of gone through that process. So according to Monash, you're allowed to have 2 slices of true sourdough. Always get discussions on what a sourdough is. And interestingly, I think there's a national debate at the minute about food labeling of sourdough bread. But a true sourdough often, and not everyone, means that it doesn't have any yeast or sugar in, and it has to have a long proof. And that is that fermentation process that actually breaks down the FODMAPs, which allow us to be able to eat a little bit more. So we always recommend trying to eat gluten still in your diet while you're waiting for tests, because not everyone will react to that. Not everyone, it will be a FODMAP issue for them. If obviously you're still reacting, you're still getting tummy pains and things like that, then yes, absolutely. Cakes and biscuits are normal ones are a no-no for most of them, but again, Monash may have the odd one or two. So people do try to switch to gluten-free equivalents of those as well. Lactose-free is the second misconception, that versus dairy-free. Now, these are two different things. And again, we always recommend trying lactose-free before switching over to full dairy-free, because it's the difference between you being lactose intolerant, so the lactose that's in stuff that you react to, versus being allergic to the milk protein. And being dairy free a bit more restrictive, because that means checking every single thing, including things like cheese, whereas there are a number of products, particularly in the cheese field. I'm a big cheeseaholic, so this is great news for me, being a lactose intolerant person, that are safe on the FODMAP diet. So cheese has quite a serving size. In fact, most cheeses do have a safe serving size and are lactose friendly, as it were, or low lactose. Whereas if you go dairy free, that does obviously mean switching out to vegan products, or vegan non-milk based products, milk free, whereas there are lactose free products that you can switch in. So there's lactose free milk, lactose free yogurt, and as I said, most cheeses, so you don't necessarily need to switch to the cheese brands, but it's just about testing the water really, and not having to unnecessarily cut everything out. There is a safe serving of milk chocolate even. We always recommend those snack size crunchy bars. They've got just the right amount of milk chocolate on them to feel like you're getting a good snack, and a good little treat, and it's safe to have as well. So there are lots of things out there that people can use, and it's still be okay without having to necessarily go full dairy free. However, again, if you're adapting, up, cut the dairy out just in case, and see how you get on. But Monash is quite good. It does list everything and the safe sizes as well. What's my third misconception?
Oh, lost you, Amanda, in terms of, go again, in terms of internet. You're back.
There we go. How long you will need to do this for?
Good question.
So elimination, which is the first stage, they recommend 4 to 6 weeks only. And really that is for you to understand, as I said before, about label reading, what this means, how you can get to grips with changing things in your lifestyle, how it's going to fit into your family life, that kind of thing. And then the next stage is then the reintroduction, where you then test not each food group as well. Sorry, not each food, but the FODMAP group. So often you get people testing individual foods, which you don't need to necessarily do. Once you pass a food group, it should mean that you should be okay with everything in that group. There may be some exceptions and people's tolerances may change, but generally that's how it works. So rather than having to test, I don't know, 100 different foods, you're only having to test, there's 11 tests that Monash recommend altogether. So hopefully bringing that process down a little bit, as to what to do and how it can then change. And then the last stage is obviously maintenance, where you know what your intolerances are, and you then create lists and make your adaptations, and then go out into the big wide world again and hope that you can have something yummy to eat.
And I'm glad you brought up all those misconceptions, because I think, you know, I often have heard lactose, everybody removes lactose, or they remove dairy. Actually, dairy and gluten get axed immediately, and then people arrive on this diet having done it for years, not realizing that actually they should have reintroduced earlier. And there's an important reason as to why we do these challenges, so that you can truly understand what your triggers are and in what amounts that you can tolerate them. So thank you so much for setting the score right on all of those.
There's probably a few more. They crop up all the time. I think the other one as well, just to add, is that, and I think I mentioned this before, about being strict. Sometimes it can be a bit harder to be as strict as you want to be, particularly for some of those hidden things. Like, we look at packets of crisps, for example, and check that there's no onion or garlic powder in them. The reason I pick up on these two is that there is no safe serving of these in any format. And we do get some people saying, oh, I'll just have a little bit on a Friday evening, you know, as a treat. And that's sort of okay, because Monash, you know, that's why it's 4 to 6 weeks for elimination. You can make a mistake, it's fine. But actually continuously doing these things, you're never going to get the most accurate results. And therefore it feels like a bit of a waste of some of the effort that you've put in, and perhaps some of the pain may not alleviate, and it then has the implications in the long run as well for you to then know what your tolerances are. So we do say try and be as strict as you can be, because it will pay benefits in the long run, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, of course, it just does happen. You go out for dinner, there may be a slip up, and people think, oh, I've gone backwards. This is a complete disaster. And, accidents do happen. But agreed, I think the stricter you can be on that 4 to 6 weeks, the better. Also, just simply because we don't want you on this diet forever. We know that it can have long-term effect on your gut microbiome and, some of your friendly bacteria such as your bifidobacteria. You're actually removing some of the key prebiotics and foods that they enjoy. So it's far better to do it strictly shorter and then start the reintroduction process, which does take time. That can take a couple of weeks, rather than half-heartedly doing it. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Well, what about some top tips? Can you give us 3 top tips or 3 things that you think are really useful, that do get shared on this group? And while you start talking and showing those, I'm just going to connect my phone to a plug before it runs out of battery.
Yes, top tips. I think I mentioned it before, but absolutely planning ahead. Please don't rush into taking part in this diet and think you have to get everything perfectly first time, because you won't, and that's absolutely fine. So making sure that you kind of look at what you would normally eat, switching out the high FODMAP things. So for example, I used to love onions. I sadly cannot have them anymore. But I've now switched all my onion type cooking for the tops of leeks. So the greens of leeks you can actually have unlimited amounts of, which is always good. And it actually does give a bit of an onion flavour. So I use that a lot in my cooking. I batch cook a lot, so to make sure that I bring the portions correctly, and then it just means there's something in the freezer. We always have that rush, don't we, on one evening a week where something kicks off or something happens and you just got to grab food quickly. And sometimes being overly prepared for these things is always a good thing, because you can then take something out of the freezer to be able to help that as well. So my number 1 top tip is planning ahead. My second top tip is probably to get familiar with the diet from a Monash perspective. Try and do your research. Googling stuff is good, as you said, as a starting point, but also take some things with a pinch of salt. Some products are tested to what's called a FODMAP standard, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a Monash standard. So again, just double checking amounts. So as you mentioned, peppers and tomatoes recently got retested. So some things that are printed, like recipes, they may need to change. A strange one that came up this week that I noticed was demerara sugar. That one's been reduced or has been tested to only 4 grams, so a very, very small amount. So again, if recipes exist, great. Print them out, type them down, save them on your phone, take photos of them, whatever it may be, and then try and switch them up to be FODMAP friendly. Or if they are a FODMAP recipe, just double check them against Monash. And as I said, Monash has got it's got a booklet, so it's got a version of the ones that we talk about from King's College. It has the foods are retested. So yeah, just go through Monash and just see if you can get to grips with it. And if you need to, just ask for help. And my third top tip is don't feel like you're doing this alone, because it can be overwhelming and it can be difficult. And I think all IBS sufferers have probably at some point in their life had the phrase, oh, just get over it, oh, just eat this, or it's just a bit of a stomach ache. And actually the disease can be really debilitating, and it can leave people really, really poorly. It can leave you feeling ill, it can leave you bedbound, and it can be disruptive to your life and to your day. So actually, being aware that you're not alone, and being aware that there are groups of people out there that would like to help you, that want to help you, and that are going through something similar, I think is really reassuring. And fight for your chance, fight for help if you need to. So if you feel like you're not being listened to by health professionals, or you're being kind of pushed aside for just generalized IBS, ask for a second opinion if you need to. Go and seek further help. If you can afford it, then go private if you can. I know obviously not everybody can have the luxury of that, but just see what's out there and find support groups that work for you. Join the IBS network if that's of support. I think they have meetups as well, but just know that even if you just have IBS, and I say in inverted commas, it's not just about just having this. It's actually about thinking, how do you adapt your lifestyle? How do you make yourself feel better and not so poorly all the time? And know that there are people out there that want to help you as well.
Wow, amazing, amazing top tips. I couldn't have thought of three better ones to share. Now, in terms of resources, you obviously touched on the Monash app. Any other good resources where people can turn if they want some more information to help them on this diet?
Yeah, so Googling is always has its bonuses, has its negatives as well, obviously. So do check when articles have been published if you do look at that.
And who's publishing them?
Check for validity about who's published them and
Thank you, sorry.
no, it's absolutely fine. And if there's any kind of actual research behind it, and if in doubt, find out who the researcher is and if it's been published and the kind of accreditation or the authority of that. Recipe wise, BBC Food have actually got some recipes. They've gone low FODMAP. Again, as I said, they are static, so they may need to be adapted with the changes for Monash. I love Becky Exo. I have to do a shout out at her. She's incredible. She's the gluten-free queen, but most of her recipes online are also now listed whether you can adapt them and how you adapt them to a low FODMAP diet as well. And all 4 of her cookbooks are color coded and symboled with how you adapt to low FODMAP, because she herself went through the low FODMAP diet and she can't have onions or garlic either. So she's one of us. She knows the journey. And all of her web stuff is free, which is amazing. So again, you can look up her recipes or follow her on Instagram. I would also say, as I mentioned before, our own FODMAPers, so it's our sister website that sits underneath our Facebook page. Again, Charlotte's put loads of good recipes on there, some top tips. All of the moderators have been through the low FODMAP diet on our page, so we kind of know what we think you are going through, I guess. But we try our best. We are very honest, and if we don't know something, we will all signpost you to somewhere else. And obviously you guys, Phil, Doctor, thank you very much for your wonderful ready meals, because you are, and I'm not obviously, you know, genuinely saying this, but honestly, you're the only ready meals that exist really in the whole country that are low FODMAP safe for your selection that you offer. And that for some people is a real lifeline, because actually just being able to have something you eat in the microwave quickly is really, really helpful. I think there are some cookbooks out there that you can use, some printed materials. As we've discussed, they can go out of date. But just, I think I honestly believe switching up what you already love can really, really work. Because actually, if you love a good, as I said, you can tell I'm a pasta queen. If you love a good carbonara or you love a good lasagna, let's just think about how we can make that a good food choice for you again. Because if you are already being restricted by certain elements of food, you don't then want to cut out your favourite of everything as well. So it's that balance, isn't it, of making sure that you can find foods that you like that are safe for you to eat as well.
So true. Food is such an important part of life and social gatherings and how we feel, and it's more than just nutrients on a plate. So yeah, absolutely, you know, you still got to be happy and get some happiness from the food you're eating. Wow, amazing top tips shared. Thank you so much, Amanda. In terms of signing off, what would be the one takeaway thought that you would like to leave everybody with?
Oh,
Tough one.
I'm trying to think of things that I haven't already said without repeating myself. Probably that just because you have IBS, it doesn't mean you can't lead a normal life. And it doesn't mean that you can't still enjoy going out for dinner, going to see friends. You touched upon the social side there as well. And actually having that confidence to say, me, and this is who I am. And either, yes, okay, I'll bring my own food, but people and places that you go to say, hey, by the way, this is, and it's not that I'm a fussy eater, it's actually that I really, really want to enjoy the food and have the same experience. Food isn't just about fuel. I've learned this along the years. Food is an experience. And food is about a social occasion, a love, and we need to reignite that and think we may be on a slightly restrictive diet, that all that has to cut out. With Christmas coming up, for example, you know, how can we make these experiences really, really enjoyable? So I guess my number one takeaway is it's okay to be on the, it's okay to have to change your lifestyle, but don't let it define you. Don't let it control you in a way that you have to change everything permanently. You can still have fun and you can still eat and you can still enjoy food. It's just, I guess, making some small changes, hopefully, to help feel healthier and better in the long run as well.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic words to end on. Thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on and sharing all this wonderful information for us, and for providing this forum and moderating this forum that allows people to get support and know that they're not alone. And a big thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Despite 2 false starts, we got there in the end, and we'll save this to our feed so the recording can be shared and watched later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
My greatest pleasure, and well done for hanging out with me while I went to get my charger as well. So lots of great information shared.
Hey.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for a lovely, lovely, lovely chat. Bye, Amanda.